After 2 months' themes tied to tech, this month's theme is assessment. We're covering small assignments, big assignments, ungraded assignments, group assignments. So if these interest you, if you're new to teaching and want some ideas for assessments in your classroom, then you want to subscribe to not miss out on what's upcoming this month. In case you didn't watch my videos from the last couple months, those themes were Notion and the Google Suite, so I'll link more information below. But to dive in, this week we're talking about small assignments, but then again, going forward, we'll cover other types of assessment as well. I'm trying a new format this month as well of using slides rather than speaking to you on camera. Feel free to let me know if you have a preference here. But as I said, we're covering small assignments, and we're going to start with one called Fate's Choice. Now, this is being described on this slide as an individual assignment, but it could be a partnered one or even a small group one, depending on your preference or the number of students, the amount of time you want to take on this activity. So there is some variation here that's possible. But the idea here is you're going to create a list of concepts or questions or statements that are tied to the week's topic. So for example, if you're teaching in a literature course, maybe you're teaching a certain novel this week, and on this day, you're teaching the first half of the novel. Well, you're going to, again, write a list, and let's say you have 30 students. Maybe it's going to be a combination of characters are going to be items on the list, settings, actions that take place during this part of the novel, literary devices that are used in this part of the novel. And it could be questions about what's occurring. It can be statements about, hey, character X does X thing, right? And so like statements of what occurs during this section. So you're going to create a list. Now, again, if you have 30 students and you want this to be an individual assignment, then you'd have to have 30 items on the list. And then use a tool that allows for random selection of an item from the list. So this might be, if you're teaching in person, you print out the piece of paper with the list and then you cut them into strips. And now you have them choose out of a hat, right? One of the strips, and that's how it's chosen. Or if you're doing it online or digitally, then you can use a random number tool. So really easy. You can just Google, number randomizer, and one will pop up, easy peasy. And you just say like, okay, there are 30 potential things, and then you click, randomize, and it'll give you 7, 13, 2, and so on and so forth. So you can use that tool. And again, in that case, you have, okay, Susie, you're going first. Click the randomizer. It tells you a number. You go to your list and you say, okay, here is what is connected to that number. And then again, you have students respond to the item they were matched with. So this can be as a starting point for a discussion. So maybe you have like, okay, the concept that they're matched with is a character. Then you can have the student respond to the item, like tell us something that happens to the character in this part of the book that you feel is very important, right? And so they can then describe that, like, okay, now let's analyze this part of the book, tied to this character, and it's a start of a discussion. Or, depending again on how you create these items, it might be just like, here are 30 questions. You answer the question and we move on to the next student. It's not a discussion. It's, hey, can they answer these questions about the topic of the week? So again, there's a lot of variation here. It can be individual, paired, or small group. I wouldn't go more than 3 students because then you have to give them time to discuss their answers before they actually respond. And then you could decide as well, is it the start of a discussion, in which case potentially not all students will go during that session, depending on how much time you have in the day's lesson. Maybe it can be, part 1 and part 2 if you teach, 2 days in a week. Or, again, potentially you might have, hey, it's not a discussion. It's here are these things, answer, and we move on to the next person. Let's cover all 30 before the class period ends. So this one's called Fate's Choice. I think it works really well because it will allow all of your students to speak up during the class's session. And it also allows you to make sure that you're getting a sense of, hey, are they really connecting well with the topics of the week? Are they understanding them? Can they make strong connections and implications to what is happening? Or does someone have struggle answering the question? And then obviously you can open up to the whole class to help them out. But then you can know, like, okay, like maybe we need to have a bit more of a lesson on this concept in particular. If there's no one willing to help, right? Everybody's confused, then that signals to you that you need to spend more time on this concept. As far as assessing this assignment goes, there are a few options here. So the first option is to assign points based off of their verbal responses. So you kind of just keep track once a student answers the question, on your own individual piece of paper, like, okay, that's a 4 out of 5, or that's a 3 out of 5, or it's a 90%, or however you want to do this. So that can be one approach. Potentially just complete incomplete. If they answered the question correctly or the prompt correctly, then it's complete. If they were totally off, maybe it's incomplete. So that's another opportunity, though it might just be, effort is all I care about. So they did try to answer the question. Maybe their answer was wrong, but it was the start of a discussion. So the fact that they tried is enough to make it complete. So you can decide how you want to do it if you do it in that sense. You can also do it based off of written responses. So perhaps you might want to tweak this assignment if you do want to have a more concrete way of assessing their work and giving feedback. Perhaps you have them all pick their prompt out of the hat or with the random generator first before anybody answers. They have all their prompts, and then give them time to answer it in written form. Hey, take 10 minutes, respond to your prompt. And then once that's done, fantastic. Now we're going to start going over this verbally. Person number 1 is Susie. Go ahead and say what your prompt is and then what your response is. And then so on and so forth. So in that case, you can just base the points off of the written responses that you collect after the activity is over. Or if presentation or speech is part of your course grade, if that's like an important aspect of it, then you could potentially assign points based off of both the written responses and the verbal response. So it might be, hey, your written response was strong, but you really struggled with actually verbalizing your answer to the class. So that's going to be taken into account in your score. So again, I think that's more important if you're teaching speech, for example, or something that really depends on verbal articulation of their student work. But that is another approach as well if you're doing the variation of having written responses with the activity. So just a few options here for assessing this particular activity. The second activity idea here is writing partners. So this works best as a partnership. And you're going to pair up your students and have them decide who will be the initial writer and who will be the initial editor. Because this activity in particular is helping them with their writing and the revision skills. So you can let them know, hey, you're going to both be doing these roles. It's not just you're always a writer, you're always an editor. You'll do both, but just pick who's the initial one for the first prompt. So once they've decided that, you're going to give them a writing prompt. So let's stick to the literature class example here. You have them analyze this scene of the book, right? Go to this chapter, go to these pages, and analyze what's happening here between this character and this other character. And so the first partner writes 1 to 2 paragraph response to this prompt, right? And then the editor is, just quietly waiting to do their role. Once they have written their response, they pass it to their editor, right? And then the editor is going to go ahead and go in and correct or make additions to this response of their partners. So this might be, have them go through and first correct anything that you think is wrong, right? So if you think they are analyzing the scene incorrectly, update it with what you think are your corrections. If they have misspelled something or the grammar's off, syntax, adding commas, the whole deal, right? So first be a reviser, right? Correct what you think is incorrect about their response, and then add more to it. So not necessarily that they're writing a third paragraph. It's, maybe you're beefing up the first paragraph. You're adding a topic sentence that your partner didn't think to do, or you're adding a transition in between the first and second paragraph. You're adding a little bit more analysis in the second paragraph, right? So basically have them strengthen what their partner has written. That's the goal here. It's practicing their revising, their editing skills. And then you flip the roles, right? So now the writer is now the editor and the editor is now the writer. So you give them a second prompt. Hey, now I want you to analyze this other scene from the book, right? And so partner 2 takes their time to write their response. And then partner 1 goes in and does the corrections and or the additions, depending on how you want to prompt them. So maybe you just want to prompt them to be better revisers. And so that all they're doing is correcting the prompt response, Or you might just have them practice their editing skills. I want you to go in and add more to the response, right? And so in this case, they're practicing these skills and you're getting a sense, right? Because you're collecting these responses after the end of the activity, and you can get a sense of what they're noticing about these scenes. Are they actually analyzing it correctly? Are they correcting the grammar and syntax properly? And so on. And so this can be a really interesting small activity to have your students do if these type of skills are really key for your class experience. When assessing the writing partners activity, there's a few options here too. So potentially you might assign different points based off their writing and their editing roles. So maybe it's a 10-point activity, 5 coming from the writer role, 5 coming from the editor role. So it might be, hey, your analysis was fantastic, 5 out of 5. When it came to edit it, you missed 7 typos, or incorrect spelling, or you added more analysis to theirs, but it actually had no connection to what they were saying. It was a completely different point that didn't really flow well in that paragraph, or whatever the case may be. Maybe that one's 3 out of 5 versus the writer role. So potentially you could do it by separate points, or you can do points for the full activity. Okay, overall, great job, 4 out of 5 for this reason, 2 out of 5 for this reason. So you can do it as a whole. And then once again, potentially it's about effort at this point. So it's going to be complete and incomplete. If you did write 1 or 2 paragraphs and you did at least do some revision and additions for, your partner when you became the editor, it's complete, right? Or if perhaps you did your writing portion, but then when it came to editing, you did almost nothing, so it's incomplete, right? So that's another approach as well. And then the third one here is board battle. And so this is a whole class activity that's done in small groups. And so in this case, again, this can be done in person or digitally, but you're going to divide your marker or chalkboard into different sections by topic, okay? And so again, if we're in a literature course, so maybe you're going to divide it by different characters. You might divide it by different plot points, by different settings, whatever the case may be here, right? And then you're going to have your students divide into small groups, into teams, and each team is required to fill out a section of the board. So again, you can give them prompts for what exactly they're doing. So maybe if you have it divided by characters, you might tell them, hey, I want you to list out everything we know about these characters from this section of the book, right? What do we know about Susie, Anna, and John, right? And so they work together to fill out their sections of the board. Or it might be more specific, right? So you have these characters. I want you to write down all the important things they've done, all the actions they've taken that you think are essential to the plot of the book, okay? So prompt however you'd like, right? And so the teams take their time, they go up, and they fill out their section of the board. Once it's filled out, you go through each section. Okay, you said this about this character, you said that, that's true, actually that's a misinterpretation, let's go into this, and so on and so forth. And you give points for the correct answers. It may be different amounts of points. Maybe it's, hey, this is something basic you said about this character, and that is correct, so you get 1 point. But this one is a fabulous point. You really delved deep into analyzing this character. This one's worth 3 points, and so on, right? So you review the answers, you give points for what they've said, and then you obviously calculate, all right, how many points does each team have for this first round? All right, we have that written down. Erase the board, new sections. Now team, answer this prompt. And again, the team goes up, fills it out, you discuss it, you give points. And so you're basically having a little battle here, right, of analyzing the various topics of that particular class period. You count up the points at the end of the game, and you announce the winning team. Maybe there's some kind of reward or extra credit, whatever the case may be here. But in this case, it's that team activity, that competition aspect that can engage students a bit more. And you can kind of see as well, once you've filled out the whole board, you can take a picture of it, or you can screenshot it if it's digital, and then share it on your class page, your LMS, so that they can have it as notes for that class period, right? As reminders for what they've done during that day. So this can be really fun as well. And again, it can be designed in different ways. So it can just be a simple, hey, the team goes up to the board and they discuss together and they write things down on the board. Or it can be, individually done. So, okay, you have the 3 teams, and so here are the topics on the board. First question, X, and then one member of the team goes up and answers the question in relation to their topic on the board. And they come back, they sit down, okay, next question. And then team member 2 goes up and answers that. So it can be much more structured if you want it to be, or it can be more the collaborative team spirit if you think that works best on your particular course's topics. For the board battle assessment, this can be done in different ways. I recommend just having complete, incomplete, like it's not something that needs points, I feel. It's more of a fun class activity that allows students to collaborate and really engage with the material. However, if you do want to make it points-based, there's a couple options here. So one option is to do points based off of their team scores. So that might be, okay, well, if your team had between 10 and 20 points total, that is a 3 out of 5. If you had between 20 and 30 points, it's a 4. And then if you had between this many and this many, it's a 5. So you can do it that way. Like, hey, did you answer? Did you give enough responses to get enough points to get a higher score? So that's one approach. Or if you do that style of hey, team member A answers question A and team member B answers question B. So it might be that, okay, well, in the 3 rounds, Susie answered the 3 questions all correctly, so she gets 3 points. But, Alba answered only 2 of the 3 questions correctly, so she gets 2 out of 3. You can potentially do that if you're having them answer it very individually, and you can track that really easily of their responses. So that's an option too when you're assessing this activity. So here is a group activity, here's a partner activity, and then here's an individual activity. Though again, there's variations on these small assignments for your class. And I do think this can work in a lot of different classes, not just literature courses. So hopefully you can tweak it for your own field of study. If you found this video helpful, click like and let me know, and subscribe to not miss out on what's upcoming when it comes to assessments in this month's theme and what happens in the future as well. I'll link below some relevant videos, as I have hundreds on this channel about teaching, so there's quite a few tied to assessment already.